Hi, it's Steve from Part Select. Today we're going to show you how to change the heater element assembly on your dryer, and it's a really easy job. All we're going to need is a 5/16 nut driver, a 1/4 inch nut driver, and either a 3/8 nut driver or socket and a ratchet, and a pair of wire strippers. Let me show you how we do it. Now before we begin this repair, since we will be working near some electrical circuits, we'll want to disconnect the power to the dryer. So simply pull the plug if it has a cord on it, and if it's a hardwired dryer, we'll need to locate the circuit breaker panel or the fuse panel and disconnect the power there. Now our next step will be to remove the front panel from the dryer. And on this model there are two 5/16 screws at the bottom of the front panel that secure it to the base. So we'll just remove those two screws. Now with the screws removed, we can tilt out on the bottom of that front panel and unhinge it from the top where it's held in place with two spring clips. And then pivot it enough sideways, we can access the wires to the door switch. We're simply going to remove those two wires. And there are two separate sized terminals, so they will be easy to reconnect them. And then we're going to set that front panel aside. Now next we're going to remove the front bulkhead assembly, and it's held in place with four 5/16 screws that secure it to the sides of the cabinet. Then we'll just lift up on that front bulkhead until we release the two tabs at the bottom, and then tilt out on the bottom and remove it from the dryer cabinet. Now next we'll want to remove the drum, and to make that a little easier, we will remove two screws that are in each front corner that secure the main top to the cabinet. Again, they are a 5/16 screw. Now with these screws removed for the top, that will allow us to gain a little extra room to pull that drum out. So we can just gently move it forward, lift it off the rear rollers, and then we can reach in till we find the belt around the idler pulley. Release the tension on it and slide the belt off, and unravel it from the motor pulley. And then we can pull that drum completely out. And we'll set that aside. We'll also remove the belt. And this will give us much easier access to replace the part. Now with the bulkhead and the drum out of the way, we now have access to the element and heater housing, and it's held in place with two 5/16 hex head screws, one on either side, that secure it to the actual housing. So just remove those two screws. And then we can pull down on that heater and tilt forward at the same time. That will allow us to pull it right out of the housing, and we can take it out front where we can assemble the new heater housing and reinstall. Now once we have that heater assembly out where we can work on it, we'll need to follow the instructions that were included with that kit that apply to your dryer, whether it is a US model or a Canadian model. On this particular model, we need to remove this black wire from the heater assembly using our 3/8 socket. Or you can simply choose just to cut the wire. We'll also remove the orange wire that feeds the thermostat on this particular model. And then we can discard the old assembly. Now our next step will be to assemble the new element. We'll begin by putting the thermal fuse and the high limit thermostat on that housing. And they're held in place with these 1/4 inch hex head screws. So locate the position for both of those and tighten those screws securely. Now our next step, if we haven't already done so, is cut that eyelet terminal off the end of the black wire on this particular model. We'll just snip that off close to the terminal And then we're going to strip about 7/16 of an inch of that wire away. And then we're going to strip about 7/16 of an inch of that wire insulation away. And once we've stripped that insulation off the end, we're going to take the black jumper wire, and you may need to trim back a little bit of that as well. And then we'll take one of the wire nuts that was included with that kit, and we're going to moret those two wires together. And we need to make sure that we have a nice, secure connection, because there is a bit of current that flows through there. Now we can discard the orange wire connector that has the single terminal on one end and a open wire on the other. We will not need it for this particular model, or the extra wire nut. Now all that remains is to reconnect the wire harnesses to the new heater housing according to the instruction sheet. So the black wire will go to one side of that high limit thermostat. Then the short black jumper goes from the opposite side of the thermostat over to the heater terminal. The orange wire will use the jumper from the thermal fuse to the heater terminal, and the orange wire from the harness attaches to the opposite side of that thermal fuse. Now next we're going to install that heater into the housing by sliding the upper portion in underneath the rear drum roller until it lines up with the two screw holes on either side. Now just hold that in place while we install the screws. And next we're going to make sure that those wires are clear of the rear drum roller. And we're now ready to put the drum and the belt back in. Now when reinstalling the belt on this dryer, I want to give you a good idea of how that is routed around the idler pulley and the motor shaft, because it's difficult to see from a wide angle with the drum in the place. So the belt is going to come down the right hand side of that drum. It's going to lay across the top of that idler pulley, then it's going to tuck down underneath and then come over and go around the motor pulley. And when it's tightened, it will look like that. Now when reinstalling the drum, I suggest that you wrap the belt around it first, and then just take up the slack with your hand and hold it tight. And we're going to slide it up over top of the blower housing, and if need be, you can just lift that top just enough so that we can slide it in. And we're going to set the rear of that drum on top of the rear drum rollers. And then just let the belt hang loosely on the drum. And then we can reach in with one hand on the right hand side of that blower housing and our left hand in through the middle. And then we can pull that belt across the top of the idler pulley, down underneath the idler pulley, and then by just pushing on that pulley to take some of the tension of the spring, wrap it around the motor. And then while putting some pressure on that idler arm that is attached to a spring, just to release the tension some, we can wrap that belt around the motor pulley and back out under the bottom of the pulley off to the left and around the drum. Now I suggest that we turn that drum counterclockwise a couple of turns just to make sure that the belt lines itself up properly. So hold the drum up against the rear bulkhead, and you should notice the blower wheel turning at the same time. And we can now put the front bulkhead on. Now when reinstalling that front bulkhead, there's a couple things we want to make sure of, and that is the inlet to this chamber has to line up inside of that felt gasket. So make sure that that's flared out just enough. We'll tuck that down roughly into position. Rotate it around until it's square with the front. And then we need to catch the bottom of the drum with those glides so that they're supported properly. And hook those tabs in, one on either side. And that should line those screw holes up. Again, we're just going to turn that drum counterclockwise, make sure it's not binding. Reach around that felt, make sure we haven't collapsed that anywhere. And then we can reinstall the screws. And tighten those all securely. We can then replace the screws that secure the top to the cabinet. And again, we'll tighten those securely. And once we have both of those secure, we can now put the front panel on. Remember to reconnect the harness to the door switch. And make sure that those connections are secure. Then we'll rotate that front panel around, line it up, and make sure that the two spring clips at the top engage the lip at the front of the main top. And then install the two 5/16 screws that secure the front panel at the bottom. We're now ready to reconnect the power, and our repair is complete.